Hi and welcome to ECCB Connects. To wrap up season 17, we share with you a conversation with Governor Timothy N.J. Antoine at the 5th Washington DC FinTech Week 2021, where he discussed the DCash pilot experience. Stay with us, we'll have more after this message.
The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is rolling out DCash, the next step in the evolution of the EC dollar. Use DCash to send and receive money to and from friends and family. Make payments directly from your smart device. Make payments from wherever you are. Download the app from the Google Play or Apple Store and sign up, or visit dcashec.com for more information. The future of the EC dollar is digital. Let's make history together.
Thanks for staying connected. The 5th Washington DC FinTech Week 2021 was held under the theme Innovation, Inclusion, and Integrity. Governor Timothy N.J. Antoine says this theme aligns with the ECCB's philosophy. In a conversation with Chris Brummer of Georgetown University Law Center on central bank digital currency, Governor Antoine discussed innovation and shared the ECCB's DCash experience.
So it is a real pleasure to have with me now Governor Timothy Antoine from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. You know, we've talked a lot over the course of the day about projects, about ideas, planning, and in this conversation we get to talk a little bit more about execution, because there have been and there are a couple of cases of CBDCs that are working, that have been implemented. And Governor Antoine has been a leader in making sure that the Eastern Caribbean has been at the forefront of the CBDC conversation. Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Professor, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
We had earlier the co-founder of Ethereum on, Joe Lubin, and he had made some interesting comments about, this isn't a stable coin architecture, but he's thinking about the Ethereum network and what kind of interoperability private networks and private systems would ultimately have with CBDCs as they come online. But when you look at the existing architecture that you guys have, it appears that you've chosen a kind of a hybrid architecture. One of our flash presentations sort of went through the differences, but a hybrid architecture where you're having a central, where you have the central bank, where you're running the CBDC system, but you have private banks and other intermediaries providing the retail services. What have what did you predict to be the business model of these kinds of private intermediaries, and what have you seen? I mean, what would they offer, or why would they offer really DCash when they can make perhaps even higher returns on deposit-based payment services?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've seen an interesting response. There are banks which are concerned about the loss of fees and charges. We hear that, but at the same time, we are acting in the public interest. The public is quite concerned about the high costs of current fees and charges, including for payment services. But here's the thing. All of our banks, financial institutions agree that the cost of handling physical cash, that cost is not just, it's insurance, it's security, it's transportation, and so on. That cost needs to come down. And here we are aligned. So because it is physical cash, because we are distributing through these same financial institutions, they recognize that the cost savings, both in terms of time and money, will accrue to those financial institutions that participate in our DCash pilot. And so we've seen many of them coming on board. And I think there's also a recognition that more wallets will come. And the wallets will contend and customers will choose. And in our environment where you have so many indigenous financial institutions, again, the economies of scale or lack thereof, what we've provided enables them to deliver to customers, potentially bring additional customers to their platforms, and at the same time lower those costs. So that is an important value proposition as part of the business model for our participating financial institutions.
To what degree do you look at this kind of project as, let's call it a first generation digital transformation project? The reason why I mention it, and again, this is just going back to a previous conversation with Mr. Lubin, was that he had sort of predicted, well, okay, to the extent to which you have CBDCs, and there will be more CBDC projects, you can imagine a number of evolutionary paths, right? One is which, and I guess, just we're going to think about the CBDC projects on the chalkboard, right? Where we're going to think, well, we could theoretically do this. We'll try to risk assess all the different alternatives and then weigh them against the existing infrastructure, right? And I suppose that's a little bit where the United States is. And then you have others who feel that because of their local demand or challenges, you need to think, or you have a route to introduce a CBDC earlier rather than later. Then there's finally this question, I guess, that Lubin was getting to, which is, okay, even if you have this cash functionality or a cash substitute functionality, and it sounds like this is where you are now with DCash for sure. It's at least what appears to be the functionality for other CBDC projects in the Bahamas and those that are still being piloted in China. But there's this idea that ultimately you're dealing with smart contracts. Ultimately, you're dealing with blockchain infrastructures. Ultimately, you're dealing with infrastructures where you can build things on top of them, other kinds of functionalities in the future. Which gets to such fascinating questions for development, for all kinds of things. Like to what degree is that interesting to you, and to what degree is this something that crosses your mind now that you're clearly ahead of a lot of others in terms of having introduced a kind of digital cash option?
No, it's certainly it's something that we've considered from the outset of our pilot. So that we believe there's significant potential for cross-border payments. We are already feeling interest, our central bank, from other central banks within the Caribbean, from Africa, and also from fintechs, payment system providers which operate within our region and outside. In other words, they are looking for opportunities for collaboration. And so as part of our design from the outset, interoperability was built in. Our CBDC, DCash, can connect with other CBDCs and or wallets. And we anticipate that as this pilot moves forward and as the space evolves, that we will see some interesting connections. So that has very much been our mindset. And that is why we believe interoperability is key in the design of DCash or any CBDC for that matter. Because the truth is, right now, the payment systems is fragmented, and we need to find a way to resolve that. And clearly, there's some action required at the regional, at the regulators level, at the regulatory level, regionally and globally, to bring us together. So that's why we're a big supporter of the G20 roadmap for payments, cross-border payments, because we believe that that is a way for bringing us together and sort of ultimately resolving some of the frictions that we have. Even in advanced economies with advanced payment systems, there's still fragmentation. You look at Europe, for example, it's pretty obvious there.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's you're sort of reading my mind, by the way, by talking about sort of fintechs, other countries. There's got to be, and there has to be, some kind of first mover advantage, right? When you're early to move and to sort of set the pace, then other people are either going to want to learn from you, or they're going to want to figure out a way to sort of leverage parts of your infrastructure or your strategy. Typically when you think about a currency, the challenge with any new payment system is going to be user adoption, right? We've started this conversation talking about scale issues, but you do have this first mover advantage. I mean, how exactly are you thinking about promoting the adoption of DCash in the union, and do you have any sort of thoughts about how intentional you want to be about promoting it one day, even beyond? Or at least the infrastructure, even beyond.
So our initial focus has been and continues to be on rollout to all 8 member countries. When we launched at the end of March of this year, 2021, we launched in 4 countries. We've since gone to a 5th, and we're on the cusp of rolling out to the other 3 remaining countries. So we've been doing some low-level marketing, as in sensitizing by country. Once we complete the rollout to all 8 members, we are going to significantly, in fact, boost our marketing. And in terms of to help drive adoption, but we also are being strategic here. We have to look at the merchant network very carefully, which we've done. So, for example, we know supermarkets, pharmacies, gas stations, utility companies, those are our priority partners, merchants, to build out the network. We also in very significant conversation with governments, because while people think of DCash as people to people, P2P, or people to business, P2B, there is a significant potential in our region for people to government, P2G, and government to people, G2P. And so those various modalities or channels or operators, if you will, we believe will ultimately allow us to drive the adoption strategy and to really create that value, even stronger value proposition for users of our DCash. And ultimately, as we move forward with that, and we sort of finesse that in the ECCU, our currency union, we will be open then to look at connections within the CARICOM area, the wider Caribbean area, and connection with our diaspora, because there are already opportunities knocking. But we've been trying to make sure that we first and foremost focus on the people that we serve in terms of getting them their hands on DCash, connecting the dots, creating that merchant network, and that essentially that ecosystem, which is why, for example, we've done an e-commerce portal functionality to allow small businesses to come on top of that. That's the requests that we've heard from small business. We've taken it on board, and we brought that into our DCash, our value proposition. So again, we're listening, we're learning, and we're responding to make sure that it works for everyone.
In striving for that universality in function, right? Do you expect for DCash to be the predominant means of making payment in the future? Do you think it's going to be something more likely to be deployed by businesses rather than households, or both?
You asked me to look into a crystal ball. What I will say to you, Chris, is that we envisage that DCash will become a dominant payment channel in our region. Perhaps at least 50% of all payments will be made via DCash. Right now, 80% are cash and checks. We believe DCash will ultimately supplant that and flip that script, as it were. But we also recognize that there will always be a demand for physical cash, at least for the foreseeable future. And we're comfortable with that. But we believe that DCash gives us additional flexibility and builds resilience for regions such as ours. And that's our expectation. Over the next 5 years, we think we will see a shift in that direction.
Yeah, I have two more questions. One a culture question, and the other going back to the PBOC. The culture question is one relating to just the role. Again, here we are, and the ECCU is one of the first out the gate with this particular tool. And the Caribbean just in general has been very much a hotbed of fintech innovation. I've done a number of events there on digital transformation and financial technology, and people from Africa, from South America, and the like will fly out to join those conversations. I mean, to what degree is that innovation, and it's important because we had this conversation out from the outset in our conversation on Asia. There's a lot of entrepreneurial energy in the Caribbean, right? How does that entrepreneurial energy sort of funnel into how a central banker thinks about something like a digital currency? We've had several conversations throughout the day about experimentation. Some countries are a little bit more comfortable with experimentation. Some countries are quite a lot less comfortable with experimentation. How does that ultimately sort of inform your decision making?
Chris, it's necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention, or shall we say innovation. And for us, that is what it's about. So the Caribbean has a history, notwithstanding our small size, of innovation. I draw your mind back to 2007 when our region launched the first multi-country catastrophic risk insurance pool in the world, CRIF. And that was birthed after the devastation of Hurricane Ivan in 2004 that devastated my home country, Grenada, the country of my birth, but Jamaica and other countries as well. And by the way, that damage was 200% of GDP. So you fast forward now when the Bahamas gets hit with Hurricane Dorian and then launches the sand dollar at the end of 2019. And then we, of course, we were already working on our DCash, but then we get hit with a pandemic. In other words, necessity drives us. The urgency that we feel is to bring real change, positive, impactful change on the people that we serve. And you talk about a central banker. I'm a development practitioner at heart, so let's be clear. It's always going to be about the people we serve, with respecting, of course, the laws that govern the central bank and working within that framework. So that's our motivation. And that is what drives us. And that is why we're moving faster than, say, some other countries that do not have the same vulnerabilities and do not have the slow payment systems that we do. And so that always has to be remembered. We may be small, but innovation is being driven by our necessities, our lived realities.
Yeah, well, with that, one then last question on the comparison point, right? So again, when Mu Ching-Chun came on to talk about the ECNY, he had described certain kinds of features. The starting places are very, very different. But you see some certainly certain areas in which inclusion is being sort of emphasized. Very, very, very different starting points. Also some important endpoints. But maybe you could just let the audience know, because what kinds of commonalities do you see when you think about that kind of project, and what kinds of differences are there?
Well, I think both China and our currency union, we are working on improving our domestic payment system. Obviously, China is a vast country, large economy, but a large domestic economy as well. And so they have their own motivations to address payments within China. And of course, in a period where consumption is becoming an even larger component, if you will, of China's GDP. In our case, we're small, but we're working on the same thing, addressing frictions within our payment system, within our currency union, to not only address the needs of our people, but position our region to be able to compete in the digital economy. Chris, one of the things I repeatedly say about building out a digital economy in our region is that we must be not mere consumers, we have to be producers. That means we have to build an appropriate ecosystem. That's part of what DCash is in respect of digital payments ecosystem. And of course, we have to also bring skills. And I mean, that's a different project, but we're also working on that with partners. So that is a commonality. I think the other commonality is a recognition that large or small, we have to work together. And I go back to mentioning the G20 roadmap for cross-border payments. So whether it is a China or our currency union or the United States or Europe or anybody in Africa, we need a coming together to create a financial system that works for all except illicit actors. That requires global cooperation. And in that sense, I think we can find common cause. Big China and little Eastern Caribbean currency union.
Well, this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Governor.
And now for this week's financial tip.
Pay all bills and loans first, and then apply 50-30-20 rule. 50% for long-term savings, 30% for wants such as dining out, entertainment, club dues, etc. 20% for short-term savings. Just find a mix that works for you.
That's it for this episode and season 17 of ECCB Connects. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next season with more exciting and informative programs to share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. While we're on break, be sure to stay connected with us on our social media platforms.